So when you're in Photoshop, there's three colors. There's this color, which is right here. See? And this color. So these are the grays, but right here is the mid gray where you can't see nothing. Because the ring is trying to be darker or lighter on the darker colors and darker on the lighter colors, and right in the middle there's just, you can't see anything. And I can hit tab button and this caps lock button, and then I get this crosshairs, same thing. You can barely see it because the crosshair is smaller, and in that range you can't see it. So there's not really much that I can do about making it so that you can see it. And I have used Fire Alpaca. And when you're in here with the brushes, you can see this little dot. So when you're trying to do texture, in a way this is showing a lot of specks, like dot, 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 because all these pixels. You can zoom in and see the pixels. They can only take one color at a time. So these are pixels that gives the textures. There's light and dark, and they're random pretty much. And when you're doing the textures, you don't have to do spec. You can just, let's say, pick up this color, or let's say pick up this color, and then scribble. Well, let me do this with a lighter. Do it the lower flow. See, as a scribble. And while you're scribbling, you can always make up for the lines by breaking them up. Or you can do spec, like that. And then you see it's not really getting you anywhere. So you pick up a color to cover it, and other colors to mix in, and when you mix in other colors, you can see there's lights, darks. There's a lot of the textures actually needs lights and darks and medium colors. It's like a full range. You need shadows, you need the mid-tone, and you need the highlights. So that's what you need in the textures. So you use all the colors from the highlights to the shadows in the thing, and you break it up. Then you can look at your original here and see right here, there's like rings. There's a ring here and lines. There's lines, and some rings in there, ring patterns in there, but they're not. They're like smooth. So when you see there's like a blurry and wider type brush, that's what you use. You just pick a bigger brush. Like, see how this looks. Could be a little bigger. So I'll pick up this color, scribble it in there, and this color. So you blending in all the colors and trying to keep those lines broken up. You don't want those lines just try to remove any pattern. So when you're actually doing a copy of what you want, like this right here, you kind of fill in with this part. Like right here, I'm picking this color and it's in there. So I want to use a larger brush because you start with the largest and then go down to the smallest for details. I could use a bigger brush. And then after you get all the color in there in the right areas, like this right here is just this area right here, and then this area goes around it. So I can go around it with this and increase the flow. And then this color right here looks kind of green from mold and water. So it's kind of a green. And then you have this shade up here. You have this in there, and this scattered through here. And then there's these lines that's heavy kind of, and they go down, but I need the other color because I got a dark shade through here, and I'm going to hold shift to drag a straight line down. I don't see much change. It might be the same color. Oops. Undo. Straight line. And I click up here, then I hold shift and bring a line down. That's like a start point and an end point. And do it by hand. And see that these are different tools you can use, like freehand, and I'm using freehand. Let's see, go back to this and pick up this color and go with a wider area. And then this is it might be not a crack, but kind of like a texture, so I use a smaller brush for that. When you're working with the hard edge brush, like what I'm doing here, and then this would be faded a little bit, so I pick up a color here and fade it. But this is the shape, right? But it needs to be trimmed. So I pick up a color right here and trim it. So it's basically, it's like, here's an example. This is like shingles. When you got the shape, I'll get a new layer. Okay, you get a shape, and I'm using the brush that's not very big. Pencil, I guess. Let's try pen. Get a pen tool and go larger. There's that and that and then that and that. And when I want to do a texture with, this is the shapes I got, but I want to add a dot here. Now, you know, if I'm going to add a dot there, you know what's going to happen? It's going to blend in and you won't see any lines. So you have to go with the different colors in order to keep it separated. And part of going with different colors is you might want to shade to help out. So I'm going to change the airbrush. That's the 53 airbrush. Now I'm going to go with a lighter color and put lighter color in there. I think with a lot of these programs, when you're drawing, if you don't move, nothing happens. You have to move to make something happen. So I made the edge with the dark color and then put in the light color over top of it. So now I go back to dark color, use a pen tool again, make new spots. And then go back to the airbrush with a lighter color. For 3D shaping, you want everything that's facing you as a lighter color. Sort of like this right here, this is the front, and these sides are facing away from you. So that makes it a darker shade. As it curves away, it absorbs more. You can think of it that way. Or because it has texture, it causes the shadow on the surface. The texture causes the shadow. So what's facing you, you're looking right down in, like you're looking down into the dog's hairs that's standing straight out, and you see skin underneath of it. So you don't see shadows as much as you do with when the texture is going away from you. It's brighter facing you. So I could probably use 2 color patches here and keep be accurate. And I'm just doing this. It'll be random or variations of colors because I'm picking in various not exact spots. So when you want to do something like this, that's what you do, is you get the colors that you want to use for the shadows and the highlights, And at this point, there's probably nothing much about textures, but right here, I could put one layer over top of the other. Like this right here, it's separated. Right here, it's joined, and it looks like it's joined. But if I wanted to put one on top of the other, then it would have to be a darker shade. So you can see it, or I can go over it. That's sort of the way it works, because you're like tiling. This is tiles, like roof tiles. You get the edge that you want and then go over with something else, and always have something in the back and something towards the front. So this is far back right here, this area. And this is the front. And you can see that this one is in front of that one. When you do round shapes like this, you can go that way, or you can go with the regular shape. Like I'm going to do this with the lighter color. Okay, there's the patch. Then instead of doing the outside, you're going to have to trim if you want to shade it like that. So you take this, go with the low flow on the airbrush, and follow the rim somewhere close. Just follow the rim all the way around until you get that shaded part darker. And if you have to, go back in the middle and add highlights. But this is for 3D. This is way pointing towards you. And lighting actually would be different. See, light would be a smaller dot, be right here, and then a dark area for shading. This is where you're going to have to trim, so you're going to have to reshape this ball. And a good way to do that is to do this on another layer below it. Start a new layer and go with the 53, and then make a spot. So, well, that was the wrong kind of spot. Need a pen tool. Okay, let's try to get to the center. It's a little bit off. I can move it up. Okay. So now I should be able to click and select. Well, I guess that don't work. Anyway, you have the shape here, and you can select that. And you have this shape, and you can trim it. Select inverse. Select inverse. Now we're going to put a shadow on it. That looks like an eraser. It's the edge. Didn't click far enough down. So I'm going to go with the little bit smaller and do the shadows on this side. Sort of like this is the where the light can't see, which this highlight will be a little bit wrong. And I go with a bigger brush, 53. And a smaller brush for a highlight. Go with a white. Of course, you know that this shadow would be over here. I mean, the highlight would be over here on this edge, because this shadow is supposed to be on the opposite side. Use a bigger brush. So you have the highlight because the light is hitting here. And if you were to be able to actually see a shiny spot like in a mirror, it would show you the shape of the light. Like if the light is round like the sun, then you see a round spot. If it's a window, then you see the window with the frame and little crosses in it where it's separated. So this is for the areas that the light can't see. So it needs to be dark. You can go all the way dark. So that's the way this textures work, is they have these. Every little bump has these. Like I can copy this, edit, copy, edit, paste, and move it. Edit, paste, and edit, paste. That's selecting. Do want to select it. So while you're doing this, is you can see that this is not right because it's not in the right pattern. So I'm going to go with that and paste another one. And paste another one. So if I have this, there's different layers on top. Then edit, paste, come down here. And this would be like a texture, a bumpy ball texture. So this is sort of an idea of how texture works. It has the light where it hits the lump, then it has shading in the valleys. So you see it's like a mountainous type thing, terrain. It's rugged for texture. And then if it gets out farther away, all those colors blend in, so it turns into more of a gray and less of a color. And then as it gets in the shadow area, it just turns dark. So when you have too much color in the shading around the edges, like this looks like it could be too much gray, but I could add it and make it look a little better to add some color there, along there. Because this is like, it depends on the texture. Like if it's wax, it soaks in some light and carries it farther. So if I want to make this a softer, sort of translucent color, I can add color to the rim right here. And if it's a solid, then it don't have that. It's just texture that grays out before it turns dark, because of the texture is causing it to be gray, because it mixes the highlights and the shadows together with the middle color. It's all jumbled together, blurred in. And see, if I merge down, merge. See, now I have all these, and then see if there's a blur here. Tool. I'm not expert with the fire alpaca. I've played with it a few times, but I haven't really figured it out completely. I saw something that says a blur. I don't know what this does. It says no option. And when you right click, it doesn't show you anything. And this is the eyedropper. This hand moves the screen around. And this comes up with these lines for grid lines. So you can do perspectives and everything, and then you can move the starting point. And my program is mostly Photoshop, so I think I'll just copy this. Let's do select all and copy, make sure I got a copy of it. And then Photoshop. In Photoshop, I was making this up because in the lines, if I haven't said this already, the lines here goes in the middle and fades in, and it needs this right here, color right in the middle, hides everything. So I probably already said that. Did it? Paste. Oh, that's a black screen. And the thing is way down there on the bottom. So I guess it copied everything as black. So if I use this, I got a blur tool here, and then a blur in this. So as the textures go out farther, it all gets blurred together. until you have just a middle of all these colors. It gets blurrier and blurrier, and till all these colors mix in. As you zoom out, you go out, it just gets blurrier. And let's see, turn this off, and I'll go to channels, and I'm going to do this to show you a little bit how channels works for lighting, or how lighting works. I'm going to use a brush, and I can pick a solid brush. And then I'm going to pick another brush that's not solid, but I want to do a not completely dark. So I'm going to do that, and then use a white to lighten it with the brush. See, 100. That looks a little bit too small, and that's about a little too small. What I'm trying to do here is make the brush a little bigger than that, like that. So this can do it in one spot. Now you have like a glow. This is at 100%. It's like a light bulb glow. Okay. Now when I'm doing the texture, is sort of like the texture for this will make it, well, you'll see. I'm going to just go to the RGB, and I'll just pick and make a new layer and fill it in with like a green. So now I'll show you lighting. The lighting filter. Okay, filter, render, lighting effects. Lighting effects works with the channel. See, this is the texture channel. That's the channel I just made in a blue, green, and red, blue, green. So these are showing like the colors. The lighting, you can pick any kind of lighting. You go with directional. You can go with Omni. Or Spotlight. That's just going to go with a Spotlight for now. It kind of looks alright. So this range right here, it says white is high. That's white is always in front. That shows depth. And the black, as it fades into darkness, it goes deep. Black is dark because it's farther back. White's high. And if I reverse that, it reverses everything. Now the those are making divots because there's opposite, because white is in the back. But normally for 3D texture to look right, you want white in the front. And you can adjust these mountain planes for as high as you want them to look. So I'm going to go with 75, just to show you a strong look to it instead of a faded. This is showing the rim. So that actual shape that I made is like a dome, but you don't see it here because it's a limit on how many layers that it would do. See, this could have done many layers till it gradually gets to the point in the middle. But this didn't do that. It's slightly humped there, but it shows a rim. A rim because this gray right here is a lot higher than the dark spot. It's not a soft blend. So it's raised up. So that's how lighting works. It's probably not great for much unless you want to do tiles, like create tiles, wall tiles, or something that has texture and like blocks and bricks and stuff, and you want to make a wall and add lighting to it. You can do it that way. Anyway, so we get back to this, see, fire alpaca. Okay, so now get back to this. See, when you're doing texture here, you're trying to not keep any lines or anything that you make. You want it to be rough. And then you add lines in it that shows the lines that you want. But in order to get most of the colors, you want the background colors to be what they are. Like this right here, this is a line, but this right here is a big area, and this is a dark area, and this is a middle type light area, while this is a brighter, lighter area. So you want these background colors in the background first before you do any scribbling on top of it, because you're not really getting the actual blend. And then when you see that these have like a blur, they're not sharp, you use a bigger brush to help blend in and make these blended shades or motions. Like this right through here is kind of harsh, but it's actually blended with a few scribble lines through it that's a little bit heavier for texture because it's on a textured surface. But this is a pale greenish line where water ran down. So when you see this, it's actually, I'm going to try to blend in these colors right here. The brush, airbrush is 44. Let's see, I want it about that size, and then try to blend these colors in here. Because I want the color that's actually running down through there. It's a more of a grayish green. You see, it's a, I see is more of a green to me. So that's the color for that. And then these colors right here, I want this color to be the scribbles where I'm scribbling around, and this right here would be like a scribble for a lighter color. So let's see how much that shows. Get a small brush, scribble. It looks like it's lightening up everything. Could be smaller. And then pick up a color that's could be like in the middle. And this through here, you want a little bit of not so heavy. And then break up the lines. Try to pick up shades that's in the middle, kind of, so you can blend them in. So you still have texture, but it's not strong texture. And then where you want lines in it to be definite in it, you just mark them in. So you can see where I'm adjusting it. It's too dark. I'm blending it in, but I want to get some darkness to it. And if it goes back and forwards too much, I just go with a softer touch. I want to blend it in, but I don't want to remove everything. Then I get the color I want. So I'm just scribbling. It's just a matter of scribbling, scribbling, scribbling. And then you put in highlights. Break up these lines with highlights and midtone colors to blend everything in. This helps remove some of the lines I'm making. And then on some of the areas, there's a wider brush. And it shows up like this in circles and stuff. Blends in. Then I go back to a smaller brush to put in more textures. And I don't see the lines and stuff. I guess it's because it's not light or not dark enough. So I'm going to try to get some light specks in there. I'm just some specking in there. And I get some darker areas. Let's go with this shade right here. And I just spec in a few spots. Of course, it don't really do much. I just scribble, break it up. So it's sort of like a texture. And when you want to match the texture, you just add details. Like right here is an L shape. So if you want the illusion that you're making an exact copy of what you see, wrong button. You draw the details. I guess I picked up a lighter color. So you add those details in there. That was messed up. The buttons are close, so I hit them quite often. Those are wrong buttons. And right here is some specks that's in a sort of like these areas. It's like little lumps, look like maybe a fractured crown on top of that. It's like crystal shapes or whatever. Whatever you want to think it looks like, you copy that. To try to match up what you see. It don't matter how you see it, it's how it looks, and it's just how you relate to it. Like it could be a larger brush, lower flow, and then have a light spot right there. And then gone. Okay, have a light spot right there. I guess the flow is a little bit too low. I'll make it a lot lighter. So things that's really detailed, use a smaller brush to show them, and sort of like get it in there. But if you were like to make a pimple, let's say if there's somebody had a pimple on their face and you're making it stand out, while it actually looks like this, it barely shows, but you're making it stand out because it's there. You're just trying to get the location and everything right. But what you would need to do is blend it in so it don't show as much. So you're not just copying the points of where they are, you're actually also copying how much they show, like how noticeable something is. And I'd say that if I was to look at this and this is not as noticeable as I'm making it here, so I can blend it in. But it's also that the rest of this area around it, that's rough. So I can add some of that and bring it over here and also tone it down a little bit. But I want texture in here. So I'm just scribbling and removing lines that's showing a pattern where I'm scribbled, and that creates the texture, and eventually you work at it and you come up with about the same thing, because you have texture, you got a simple texture you make, you add highlights and shadows and whatever that makes it more like what you see. It don't have to be exactly like what you see, but you make it look more like what you see. And while people look at this and they look at that, it looks similar. Like right here, this right here is a patch. It's like right here. It's a gray. It's dull. Everything's blended together in that area. So I see the brush. I want to get that size. So I fill in this with that gray. Sort of like the area that it's in now. So it does the same thing. And then I go back to needing more details around it. And blend in some of this gray with areas around it. And eventually it'll be more like this. And the more you follow the pattern and colors, the more you come up with this. And you gotta watch your flow, so then if you're spending a lot of time scribbling and nothing seems to be happening, you want to see something happen. Say increase the flow when you need it and lower it. Like it could be too much here, but I think it's all right. So this is how you texture stuff. Now if you're going to go really fast, you're going to get some details in there. I'm have this really dark right here, and that's not that dark right there. So it's more right here. And then you have this is blended in a little more. So that's like I was setting a position, but I wasn't getting the right color is showing. It's a lot bolder than what this is. And that's like a gray color there. And this gray color is actually darker than the areas around it. And when you see this right here, it's blurred in. That means it's a bigger brush. And I'm going to use a bigger brush to blend it in. So I get basically what I see there. Then I go with the small brush because I want to draw that line right there. And go with a little bit darker. Because the flow rate. There. So I see that. It's not as noticeable as it's more noticeable than this. So I'd have to hide it in there a little bit, get some colors around it, blend it in so it's not as noticeable. But it is there. And you just keep doing that. Just keep doing details like this right here. And then pick up this color. And it's right in here somewhere. And let's see, go with the more flow. See, and this right here is in the middle. It's like the tip of this. It comes down to there. It's down to there. I probably have it out of proportion. It helped to have the grid to get all the proportions and work with it from each small picture. If you haven't seen that video, it helped. Basically, I can keep working at it and get it to look like this, and it's more like scribbles and stuff. And when you're happy with it, that's good enough. Like if you want to cover more areas, so you want to go like this and the scribble, and that might be too much or not enough, and you want to blend it in and just remove some of the lines, increase the flow for that to blend it in. You just want to do something quick. That's the way you do it. You just try not to have so many details in the line and just keep going over it. Breaking it up, adding more details, doing different colors. You need highlights, you need shadows. And this is the texture. And if it's like the texture you want, you can copy it, paste it in, get more areas to be a repeat, or you can work on the other colors around the area. I assume that you've seen that there's lines mostly like this going in this direction. Some of them going in the other direction, but there's a lot of lines going in this direction. So just add lines and stuff. You just basic texture, you just rough it in. Keep those lines from showing that there's like a pattern, that when there isn't, you don't want a pattern. And if you just want to add some specks in there, you just click, 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 click around. But it's not really going to get much because you have to actually be moving besides just that first click. First click is a lot paler because you're not moving, but as soon as you move, it's stronger. So I'm breaking up this line. That gives more texture, and there's a loop right there. I'm going to break up that. I want to add the sort of like there's a loop there, and I can put lighter in the middle to show it's like a hole or a spot, like right there. I make that look like a spot. It depends on the texture you want, but if you just want a texture, that's how you do it. You just rough it up. It might not be that important for texture, but as long as you have one that's roughed up, you can see that this is got big smooth areas and stuff in it, but there's specks every once in a while. So you can just do specks every once in a while. And then pick this color, go a little bit darker. Do specks every once in a while. Move a little bit to help. And you have those specks. So whatever you see in there, that's what you want in there. If you see that this is the lighter area, you want a lighter area and try to get it all. And if it's not that rough, it helps to go over with the brush at the lower flow. So you go with the brush that size. Add some highlights up in here. And that sort of like makes some of this pale, blends it in. If you got these areas right here is blended in, that's what you want. You don't want them to look any more noticeable than they are here. And the things that you notice, you want to be noticeable. Like this here, like that, is basically looks similar. I wasn't trying to be accurate. And if I was working with the graph, I could work with each block and get each block more accurate. So that's, I guess, is enough for the texture like that. And as you've seen, that texture has high spots and low spots, so you always need shadows and highlights and midtones. And when you do edges, you can't keep the same color when you're using the hard brush because it becomes just one color. And you want to do it in a tile motion. Sort of like if you were to want to make a leaf, I'll just turn this to a green. And then get a the pen tool, and let's go a little bit bigger than that. Okay, and then the new layer. Okay, let's say I want this to be a leaf, and I want it, the eraser, to help with making the leaf. So actually, this is a little bit big for a brush on there. So let's see. I'll just go back to the pen tool and go smaller, add more in there. Okay, there's a leaf. That's the shape of a leaf. And I can select it. And this, I suppose this is supposed to select it, but I don't see how it's doing that. It's because everything is selected. So then I'd add shading and stuff to the brush with a soft brush. Let's see what size we're dealing with. That might be alright. Add some shadows through the middle. If I want a leaf to be like the edges of a leaf curled in, then this would be the inside of the leaf. Let's go with more flow and darker. This would be the inside of the leaf. And this would be the outside. I can pick up this color and trim, or add more to it. And if I want the leaf to show that edge is like a real sharp edge, then I use the sharp edge brush, the hard edge brush. Just pick up the color and show what I want it to show, make what I want it to happen. And then use a soft brush for our other stuff to help blend it in. Or like if you want to make like a pea pod or something. And then get this color, it's in the middle. Blend it in. And then there's always going to be grains in the leaf. So you have ribs. That's probably a little bit too dark for ribs. Then you want to highlight color, show the edges. And then I want to go with a shade to shade it back so it shows that this area right here is up front and this area is farther back. So go with the brush, change the brush size. So then I can add that to the edge. Then I can go back to adding little ribs in it. Edit, undo. Go with the low flow. That way I don't have to worry about the color too much. And then I want to use this, not a really big brush, but something that I can shade in here. That's probably too dark. Well, that's like a cupped leaf, and I can draw a little stem on it and everything. But you can see that where I want it is the leaf, and then I fill in a shape. Let's get rid of this selection area. It's like layers, but except you're using a brush to make the shape. And then you're using the eraser to trim to help create the shape. So it's like a 2-layer process. Or like one layer goes on top of the other. So when you're doing this, you can create different shapes. And work with it. Or you can use different, like if you're doing a constant texture, let's start a new layer. You change different colors. Like I'm doing, this is a rough texture and I want to use a lower flow after I get it all filled in. So I want to do like this. Let's say that this will be a brown. And be more of a gray. So like right there. Okay. This is a background color. Now let's say if this was like a tree stump. And I want to make it look like a tree stump. I got to do highlights and shadows in it. And I pick a brush. That would do it right there. If you see it, it's over there next to the leaf on the side. That's the size. Go with like that. And then when I scribble in here, it's not gonna really change it until I go over it again. In Photoshop, it will keep building up in there. So as you stack, you got different textures. because you're showing edges. And in order to keep showing them in Photoshop, you have to keep changing colors and hints of different shades and stuff always in them. So let's go into Photoshop. Okay, now I'm gonna just fill this in. I picked up that color and didn't use it. Okay, so let's say that this is a tree and it's shaded along the sides from where it goes rounded into the going around. So this is give more of a rounded shape. Oops. So you can imagine this is like a tree. It goes around and everything. Now I'm going to go with a hard brush. And see, I'm still going with this, like this. But I need to keep changing colors. So then when I'm doing these things, it's not going to keep mixing with the colors. And while I'm going around, what I need is to keep dark areas over to this side. This is at a real messy flow rate. So I want darker areas over here on this side. As I get over here, I need lighter areas, lighter colors. And always need shadows. This is more or less blending everything together. And this flow rate on the brush is the spacing is spaced out. Bring the spacing in so that it's smoother. See, smoother. So now we have more like what we want, smoother. And go with a lower flow rate. I click on it and it don't want to take off. Okay, so you're roughing up the textures, adding in different colors, but that's how it works. But I'm not doing a pattern. So suppose if I was doing a pattern, see, I would want to fill in an area. Let's see, start it, fill in the area. And then to do the texture, I get a small brush and do a pattern like. And it could be just making a pattern like this. Or it could be streaks like this. And as the streaks go out this way, you have another layer because you see more of a side view of it. I'm thinking about there's dark areas here and light areas there. As I'm narrowing the lines, and as it gets towards the middle, the lines look bigger. So I can actually go with this small line, go up and down like this. Have to click on it first. This is a variable for the cracks and variations in the cracks with darker areas. Let's see if this is darker. Nope. This will be. And then there's on the surface, sort of like there might be a variations. It's not like a solid edge line. You don't want the edges to show as much, or it sort of gets blended in. Let me go down this line here. So you pick up a color and use a soft brush where you want it to be blended in more. Like right here, it's not much blending going on. It's a rough texture just to knock off some of this edge, because the edge is on one side, and not let it go too much with the brush. And then you pick up some of the color and throw it in the other direction. So it's a roughness, but it goes both ways, not just one way. Right there, I want it to blend in more and not take on too much of that. So I want something like in the middle. I'm trying to pick it up. And then I was thinking I'll just try to go with the lighter color with the lower flow. Go with the highlights because I want this side of the tree to be highlighted. Of course, I messed up right there. Throwing in some stuff in the wrong areas. And don't always want solid lines through yours. Like right here is just solid lines. I think I'll go with that shade. Nope. White was okay. So this is like if the tree was facing towards one side, you can add the highlights on that side to make it look right. And then the dark areas, you want to break up this rough line, make this line a little rougher. I think I'll go with a stronger flow for that. That is like a vertical type texture. And in some vertical type textures, you have like a gap, and the lines don't always follow the right same thing. So it could be blended in, but it have cracks in odd places, so you have a separation. Because when a tree grows and their bark creates a crack, it's because the tree is growing fatter, and the lines are from the skin on the tree getting stretched out. So it could have cracks in it that's not following the same pattern, not vertical. So as you learn more about the pattern in the tree bark, you learn uh, step back. I'm trying to pick up this color. So when you learn more about the tree and you learn how the pattern is from your study of it, you draw what you know. If you don't know enough about it, then maybe you should examine it a little more and learn more about it. Because it could be look like a tree. It could be a similar simulation, but it's kind of obvious when you do know about a tree, the pattern, and when you don't know. So it's not always what you don't know. It's what you should know. So when I studied the oak tree, I saw that it was like this. It is a lot like this. I say, except the colors were gray, and I can just go with the normal, go to color and widen this, go with this gray, and just gray out all, make the colors all turn gray. If you ever use coloring this way, this is how it works. So if I want to do like a wood texture, sometimes a wood texture or wood grain can include stuff that makes it easy. Like if you go a filter and you got motion blur, that helps with the grain. It helps the grain and also helps get things going like in a direction that you want, blend it in. Let's say if you have, I'm going to fill in this area right here, but I'm going to have to use normal. They say that I'm going to use a wood color. Say that this is a wood color, and it has some light patches in it, light areas. And then you have specs, is you want to do like the grain, and I'm going to select off this area right here, and then use mode, the brush mode, set it to dissolve, and then throw in some specs. Edit, undo, too many. The flow is too high. Try lower flow. And then some lighter specs and less of them, go with the one. Okay, so this would don't really look right now, but when you use a motion blur, then it should change your opinion on what it looks like. Go with the longer grain, and this is sort of like a grain. See, it has a grain pattern, and that's like a base. Then you have the brush where you use a low flow, not dissolve, normal, and just add some grain in there, more consistent. And then some patches where the grain is heavier. And with all highlights, you need shadows. But this is actually not just trees as they grow. They grow. Let's get this. Try this for a shade. There's the winter growth and the summer growth. Summer growth, everything grows faster. So it's the winter time leaves a harder, coarser wood, so that looks darker. I'm going to go with a wider brush. a little more flow. So you can see it looks kind of like it's starting to look like wood green. If you want to throw in some knots or something, then you need to have it go into an area where it's just more like the grain is following. And if you want to get this to look right, you might need to smudge tool to help draw out these lines. Of course, I don't see anything working here. It's only 4%. Let's go with this. I'll just drag the end of it like this, and then go out like that. I'm going to use the shift as I clicked on a spot there and make a straight line. So that's basically just use your imagination on some of it, and some of it you can actually do what you know. Of course, that's starting to look bad. This texture has a lot of details that you actually have to know. It's not just something that you can just do at random and just have something, unless you want it rough. Like if you want a rusty color, use rusty colors that give you a rusty look. Like I was using here, I was doing this wood, and I was using the wood colors in it. Because without the right colors, it could be any color. Let's see, image adjust, using saturation. So it could end up with all kinds of weird colors, so it don't look like wood as much. It looks more like fur or something. So colors are kind of important. You want to do a rusty colors to do rust. You fill in a large area. I say this is kind of like a rusty color. Then you have darker colors in it, so I'll probably have to come up with some darker shades in it and some redder shades. Undo. You saw me select it. and then red shades, and then like an orange shade that's more of a pale, and like right there, that color, and then that color, and that color. So those are like colors that's in there besides this color. So I just like do this, fill it in. Now that I got the colors, I imagine that they look alright. And I change the brush size, do the scribbles with the lower flow. And say if this is a real rough spot right here, it'll have all the shades in it. And I'm make sure that I don't have two lines showing too much. Just more like break them up. But I also want to control the lightness. Like if I want this area over here to be lighter, and I just use more lighter colors in it, break them up. And if I want this area over here to be darker, I use darker shades and make it darker in that area. So it's kind of like different layers of brightness, darkness, and also controlling the outcome of it, that where you want it to be brighter or darker or in the middle. And the way I remember rust is it's got specks, light specks in it. So I'm going to increase it and just do some specks. Button. And then it has like this shade right here specked in it. And there's like the rest areas is kind of like infected. And then you have streaks in it from rust, the flow of the rust or the water. Then you can actually use a color like this is like a purple. You want to have different purples around the edge because paint kind of blisters. Okay, this is like the blend. Go with the lower flow. That flow is a little bit too low. I'm not getting much done. And then you gotta definitely have an edge that is in the that's dark around it. That'd be like paint peeling and blistering. So you can see that I'm still breaking up colors. Not going to have like lines unless I want them in there, like a line there, then a line for the highlight along the edge of the paint, and shadows. Go with a smaller brush, go with the heavier color and get that highlight in there. For the shape of the paint that's peeling. I'm not going by anything that I know. I don't really know that much about it. So as far as I know, I'm not really getting it right. But I assume that when you have a rough textures like this, it's not just color. You're going to have shadows in it from the textures. Like this, you don't have to have shadows in it because that's the color. That's the paint color. But this texture right here, you have to have some black in there for shadows in the texture. It's not how I'm doing this black, is I'm just moving it around. Maybe try not to have any lines that would show and try to break them up. And it's at a low flow. And if it's not low enough, I just go lower. So when you're doing textures, you have like this. You go like that. You can go over it as many times as you want. And the more you go over a certain spot, the more it's going to show. Because you're stacking. Like this little bit of a flow is not as much, but right here, it gets more and more and more as you keep going over it. It goes over it, you cross over the same lines, and it makes it stronger. And these swirling, when you're going around like this, you're overlapping lines and making these spots. So when you want to blend them in, you take other colors to take out some of these lines. And while you're doing that, every time you're looping around and hitting the same lines, you're building up heavier spots. So that's how texture works. And if you have a pattern in it, like this is a pattern, look kind of like the lines that I drew, and it could be built over top, or it could be removed, or you can have just try to imagine, like if I want to imagine that there's areas in here that's like this, and this is like a texture. It looks like this. Then you take the highlights and you highlight the spots that's supposed to be on top, because you're not going to have everything underneath. You're going to have some things on top. And it could go brighter. So you can create your own texture or whatever you want, just how you want it. You make rough, you make a large texture pattern. And as long as you have highlights and shadows, you made the texture. So that's how you do texture. And I guess that would be pretty much explaining as much as I can think of right now. I guess that's enough for now.